Well, howdy there, Internet people. It's Belle again, and welcome to The Roads with Belle. Today is October 27th, 2024, and this is episode 62 of The Roads Not Taken, which is a weekly series where we go over the news that was unreported, underreported, didn't get the coverage we felt that it should, or we just found it interesting. And then we go over a few questions from y'all. Oh, and just to give everybody a heads up, there will be something coming out on this channel every day from now until Halloween. And by popular request, we do have some stories coming out for you. Today is October 27th, and it's National Black Cat Day. Just a day to try to do away with some superstitious beliefs and maybe adopt one if you have a forever home. On this date in 1787, the first of the Federalist Papers were released. The plan was to write a total of 25 essays, the work divided evenly among the three men. In the end, they wrote 85 essays in the span of 6 months. John Jay got sick after writing 5. James Madison wrote 29. Hamilton wrote the other 51. Nonstop Hamilton quotes arose. And in foreign policy, reporting came out saying that Elon Musk and Vladimir Putin talk on the phone and have been in regular contact. A NASA administrator has called for an investigation into Musk now. U.S. allies have said they will respond in kind to Trump's tariffs if they are enacted, further damaging the U.S. economy. North Korean troops headed to assist Russia in some unknown way have set off a flurry of diplomatic activity. If it put South Korea in a position where it needs to make a move, they could provide arms to Ukraine despite their long tradition of not directly supplying arms to a country at war. Russia attempted to solidify BRICS, which is an economic bloc behind its war in Ukraine. It failed miserably. The declaration said, quote, "We emphasize that all states should act consistently with the purposes and principles of the UN Charter in their entirety." This is China's preferred diplomatic language. While there was a swipe at the West about sanctions in the declaration, this section clearly demonstrates that Russia is the junior partner in relation to China. In U.S. news, Biden issued an official apology for Indian boarding schools, calling it a blot on U.S. history. It's a start. The Republican senatorial candidate in Wisconsin said he was not an expert on the U.S. Farm Bill. Democratic Senator Tammy Baldwin got the endorsement of the Wisconsin Farm Bureau. She's the first Democrat running for statewide office in decades to get it. The Baltimore Bridge collapse has been settled for about $100 million to be paid by the cargo ship owner. Michelle Obama hit the road to campaign for Harris. A man in Texas was arrested for allegedly punching a poll worker because the poll worker told him to remove his MAGA hat. Just a reminder, in most places in the U.S., you can't wear political clothing like that when you go to vote. In cultural news, Trump went on Joe Rogan's podcast and left rally attendees waiting for hours. Trump said his biggest mistake was picking bad and disloyal people, which was surprising. I would have thought mismanagement of the pandemic, not responding to the Kerch Strait incident, getting a bunch of Americans hurt in Iraq, making bogus claims about the election, or so on, would have been higher on the list. Both the LA Times and the Washington Post have refused to endorse a presidential candidate, sparking outrage from readers. Beyoncé rallied with Harris in Texas. In science news, a report indicates that every dollar in NASA's budget generates an almost $3 boost to the U.S. economy. In oddities, Trump is leaning into the idea of eliminating federal taxes. I'm sure he'll just make Mexico pay for it. Elon Musk received the warning from DOJ we said was likely and appeared to stop his $1 million giveaways tied to a petition, only to start them up again. I feel like this isn't over. Also in oddities, Vance. Okay, on to the Q&A. Between Bo saying disaster relief is transformative and your experience in the military and as a medic, what would you think of the U.S. enacting mandatory National Guard type service? Something where young men and women have to serve a year doing relief work around the country. Kind of like Habitat for Humanity plus Red Cross plus National Guard. Then they'd have to serve 1 weekend a month afterwards. Your thoughts? I think that would be an excellent step towards grounding our nation, bringing us together and transforming our military might into the world's paramedics Bo envisions. We're really not fans of making anything mandatory. That being said, I think the world would be better off if more people would commit to really helping their communities and volunteering. We have to find a way to instill that belief that if you have the means, you have the responsibility to make things better. But this is definitely a way to do it. I just don't like the mandatory part. I'm wondering if you think the presence of North Korean troops in Ukraine will change the minds of any detractors of the war, given that North Korea is a much more overt dictatorship and has traditionally been seen as more openly antagonistic towards the U.S. It won't change the minds of all of them, but there might be some on the far right that are swayed. I think the most visible thing that you'll see in U.S. politics is kind of the center-right people who were mildly supportive of Ukraine. They may become more steadfast. The news is talking about North Korean soldiers going to Russia. What does this mean? Are they like Western advisors/trainers who are probably in Ukraine? Will they actually be fighting? The Koreas aren't in NATO. Would that mean this is a low-risk escalation? Does Russia expect the West to ask Ukraine not to kill North Koreans because North Korea is a nuclear power? Sort of like you said in the video about THAAD and U.S. troops over there. Please give us context to this. By the numbers being discussed, which are about 15,000, they aren't just advisors and certainly not trainers. Will they be fighting? Maybe. The U.S. and the West have said North Koreans are, quote, fair game the second they cross into Ukraine. So if they were hoping to use them as tripwire troops, that was a huge failure. And I think they just desperately need troops. And maybe they'll use them in the rear. I've heard a lot of people say that there are a lot of safeguards to stop Trump from using the military to go after the citizens, but nobody ever really details what they are. Can you give us a rundown? There's a bunch on this channel going over them generally, and the reason nobody goes over them in detail is because Trump's team doesn't understand the safeguards, and nobody wants to put it out there for them to analyze. Based on his moves and rhetoric, he'll hit walls he doesn't even know exist. I remember that the channel did a video on the technique of manufacturing consent in foreign policy. Is an election version of manufacturing consent happening right now? When MAGA manufactures BS voter fraud claims and tries to use the media attention to grant themselves permission to step in and investigate problems, does this smell a lot like the Chomskyite foreign intervention technique? There's a lot of crossover between foreign policy techniques and domestic political techniques. We like to pretend they're different, but there's an immense overlap. And it's becoming more prominent as American politicians start to fall for foreign influence operations. We'll try to remember to do a video about this after the election. I was just wondering if Dee and Dana are the same person. I thought I heard Belle use them interchangeably a couple of times. Dee and Dana are not the same person, and if I used them interchangeably, it was a mistake. When are the stories coming out? What are they about? Between now and Halloween, and there are 3 of them. One is about caves, one is about Mars, and one is about an ex-girlfriend. I appreciate the fun questions. Send more. So that looks like it. A little more information and a little more context, and having the right information will make all the difference. Y'all have a good day.